We've really been looking forward to today. We've really been looking forward to today. This is a special day for us at One Hope Community Church. You know, a couple weeks ago, I was telling a story about one of the things that God did in bringing about One Hope Community Church. And they were saying, well, I've never even heard that. And we've been talking about this, Casey and I and the steering team and others. There are a lot of things that God did that brought about One Hope Community Church. This is not something that we have done. This is something that God did. And I think there's great value in kind of reviewing and telling the stories and hearing about the things that God is doing here. I've been so encouraged this week as I've been putting this together. Casey and I met early in the week, and we were kind of reviewing some of these things and, you know, which ones we wanted to pick out to share with you. And so we picked out a few of the special things. You know, I can really only recall maybe 3 things like this that I would say over the course of 30 years that God was doing that. I'm talking about big things. I know like every day God is doing something, but I'm talking about like big things that God was doing where things were happening and things were moving and you can see God's hand at work. One of them was early on when I was first a youth pastor in this little town up in Minnesota, and we watched God put together a youth group and just watched it grow. And you know, I was new and green and didn't know what I was doing really, and I just look back and I say that was something God did. I didn't really have some great plan. Wasn't my doing. I just look back and say, praise God, He did that. And then I was thinking about the marriage event and what a great response that was. You know, in the beginning, I didn't really think that was something that was going to work, but in the end, it grew to be a great ministry, and many people were helped by that. And we heard it over and over again. God is doing something very special, and we're just kind of His servants watching Him work. And so those were things that you know, I saw God do, and we all have that sense now that with One Hope Community Church, God is at work in a new and special way. This is something that's really unique. Here we are, right in the middle of a pandemic. Most churches are, you know, closing down and shutting down ministries and trying to, you know, figure things out. We're just trying to keep up with God here. And I think our future is really bright when we consider all the things that He's been doing. I was thinking this week about how the Israelites used to set up monuments. You know, there's something I think valuable about telling the stories and reviewing what God has done. And, you know, this really isn't my story. This is our story. This is your story. It's not just Casey's and my story or the steering team's story. This is all of our story. We're all a part of what God has been doing. And I imagine this morning as we tell some of these stories that you're going to say, you know, or think of things that God did in your life to orchestrate your presence here, your involvement here. I think it's nothing short of miraculous. And I think you'll see as we move forward this morning, there are lots of reasons to praise God. I was thinking about how the Israelites would occasionally set up a monument to remember what God had done on a certain spot. And I think the most probably well-known of these is when they were crossing into the Promised Land and crossing over the river, and God stopped the waters so that they could cross just right opposite of Jericho. When they finally took, after the Egypt experience, after the wandering in the wilderness, after all of that, they finally get to cross over into the Promised Land. It's a day of hope. It's a day of great blessing as they move forward. And I just want to kind of start this morning with this account because I see so many parallels between what's happening here and what we're doing this morning in remembering what God has done. Joshua chapter 3. Then Joshua rose early in the morning And all the sons of Israel set out from Shittim and came to the Jordan, and they lodged there before they crossed. It's a moment of pause before they go into the promised land. And it came about at the end of 3 days that the officers went through the midst of the camp. And they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God with the Levitical priest carrying it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. However, there shall be between you and it a distance of about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you shall go, for you have not passed this way before. It's interesting, this distance of 2,000 cubits. It's a little more than half a mile that they were to stay away from the Ark of the Covenant. It's kind of sends a message, don't mess with the movement of God. Respect the movement of God. We know what happened when the ark teetered at another time, and some guys reached out to grab it, and they died right there on the spot. I think there needs to be great respect and great awe when God is moving. And I think that's what I sense. I think that's what many of you sense. It goes on, then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, take up the ark of the covenant and cross over ahead of the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went ahead of the people. Now the Lord said to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, and they may know that just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. So there's this anticipation. What's about to happen here? Down in verse 11, behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over ahead of you into the Jordan. He's giving the instructions about what will happen. Now then, take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, 1 man for each tribe. And it shall come about when the soles of the feet of the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off, and the waters which are flowing down from above shall stand in one heap. He's announcing what's about to happen. And then, so it came about, verse 14, when the people set out from their tents to cross the Jordan with the priests carrying the ark of the covenant before the people, and when those who carried the ark came into the Jordan, and the feet of the priests carrying the ark were dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks all the days of the harvest, that the waters which were flowing down from above stood and rose up in one heap, a great distance away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, and those which were flowing down toward the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off. So the people crossed opposite Jericho. And the priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all of Israel crossed on dry ground until all the nation had finished crossing the Jordan. I think the population of Israel at this time was somewhere around 2 to 4 million. We don't really know the exact number. It must have been just a crazy sight watching this. If you could just stand off on the bank at a distance and watch what was happening, it must have just been an incredible sight to see this movement. Over in 4 verse 5, Joshua said to them, this is after they've gone across and observed this miracle of the Lord providing the way. Joshua said to them, cross again to the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. He's saying this to one representative from each of the 12 tribes. He's saying, go back now, cross over to where the guys are standing in the middle of the Jordan. And each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the son of Israel. And thus the sons of Israel did as Joshua commanded. This is down in verse 8. They took up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, just as the Lord spoke to Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Israel, and they carried them over with them to the lodging place and put them down there. Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan at a place where the feet of the priests who carried the ark and the covenant were standing, and they are there to this day. Isn't that interesting? You know, they cross over, they watch God do this miracle again after, the parting of the Red Sea. It's kind of similar. They cross over and they're about to enter the promised land, and they watch God do this great miracle, and the Lord says, now I want you to set up a monument. I want you to set up 12 stones that will represent the 12 tribes, all that crossed over into the promised land. Why would God tell them to do this? Why go to the trouble of setting up these stones? They just saw what God did. Why do we need to have stones? Why do we need to have stones in the bottom of the Jordan River? It says those stones are there until today, but no one can see them. They're at the bottom. They're at the bottom of the Jordan River. This is what Joshua says to them over in chapter 4, verse 21. He said to the sons of Israel, when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what are these stones? Then you shall inform them, your children, saying, Israel crossed this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the water of the Jordan River before until you had crossed, just as the Lord your God had done to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed. That all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, so that you may fear the Lord your God forever. He says, we're going to set up these stones, referring to the ones on the bank. We're going to set up these stones so that when your children see them, you can tell your children the story and tell the nations, tell everyone the story of what God did on this place. God wanted them to remember what he did. Well, when I was reading this again this week, I'm always struck by these stones that Joshua put out in the middle of, and apparently, it seems, as these guys were putting the 12 stones up on the shore and setting them up, probably in a pile, he's going the other direction, just trudging out there, out into the middle where the priests are standing, and he's dragging stones and making a pile in the middle. And then the priests come up on dry ground, and then later the water comes back to its natural flow, and those stones are covered up. So what's the point of having stones in the bottom of a river? Well, there were stones on the shoreline. I think it was an opportunity for the fathers to share with their children, for everyone to share with their friends. You see these stones here, it's a memory, but you know what? There's some stones out there in the middle of the river, and we can't see them. But they're there, and it's part of the story, and no one can see them. It's kind of like the work of the Lord. Sometimes we don't see what the Lord is doing, but he's there, and he's working, and we can trust him. And I can't help but think about One Hope Community Church. There's so many things God is doing. I'm sure there are things that God has done in your lives in the last year that you can say, God pointed us to One Hope Community Church. This is all of our story, and it's an incredible story. We need to tell this story to other people and let everyone know what God has done here. And again, this isn't something we've done. This isn't something that any one of us would have dreamed to put together in the way that it's come together. Psalm 33, 10 and 11. The Lord foils the plans of the nations. He thwarts the purposes of peoples. But the plans of the Lord stand firm forever, the purposes of his heart through all generations. And apparently, it was God's plan for One Hope Community Church. This was God's plan. Proverbs 21:30, there is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord. When God's plan is underway, there's nothing that's going to stand in his way. God, Jesus said, I will build my church, and even the gates of hell cannot prevail against us. And I can't imagine what God has in plan for us, what he has in store for us ahead, just looking at the way this has come together. And I just want to encourage us. Let's make sure that we're always in stride with God's plan, that we're going the direction that God is going. Well, how did this begin? There was a beginning. There was a point when One Hope Community Church came into existence. After facing the difficulties of the winter and early spring of 2020, Julie and I were feeling the need to be with other believers. We just were felt like we were just out there drifting. And it was really Julie had the idea to bring together some people and let's just have a night of worship. Let's have a night of just praising the Lord and being with other believers, people we know and love. And so we invited friends, neighbors, family members, and some of you were at that first Friday night fellowship. It was really a very special time. God did some really neat things there. But one of the things that we discovered was that there was a stir happening over some issues related to honesty and transparency and truth. And after these Friday fellowships had been underway for some time, I began to hear some people saying to me privately, maybe God is calling you to start a church. Not necessarily with the Friday fellowships, but just people that weren't necessarily connected with that. One of them was a neighbor friend of mine. He said, Doug, have you ever thought that maybe God was calling you to plant a church? And then I heard other people saying the same thing. And I just kept thinking, I just can't imagine how that would ever be. I always had this idea that if you were going to plant a church, you kind of had to have this salesman personality. You had to really get out there and, beat the bushes and knock on doors. And I'm not sure really, though, that it has to be that way if God is in it. God works with all kinds of personalities. God has brought together at One Hope a variety of personalities. It's not just one person's doing. It's his work in all of our lives. Well, those Friday fellowships were very special. And interestingly, this is something that Casey and I had talked about going back several years. And it was usually Casey. He would say, man, maybe we need to start a church. Maybe this is something we should do together. And I always felt like it just doesn't feel like God is leading in this direction. But when One Hope came together and the ideas started to work together to bring about One Hope, it was very clear that God was saying, now is the time. Now is the time. A lot of those hesitancies, and I think all of us come to the work of the Lord with some hesitancies. You can look at the heroes, our heroes in the pages of Scripture. Many of them came with hesitancy when the Lord called them. And I think Casey and I both experienced that same thing. Sometimes God uses people who just simply say yes. I think God chooses to use people who simply say, okay, Lord, I'll do it. He's looking for willing and submissive servants. Those Friday fellowships were really a big part of One Hope coming into being. And they were very special times. They were needed times for people, many of us who were hurting. And then there was the time that came, Julie and I felt we needed to sell our house. We didn't want to sell our house. It was a very difficult and very painful decision. We built the house, had it built. We raised our children there, had lots of great memories. It was a great house, great home. But we just felt God was saying, it's probably time to sell it, to prepare for whatever's in the future. We didn't know. We didn't know what was ahead. We didn't know what God planned. We just felt like, let's trim things down and prepare for what might be ahead of us financially. And so we did that. And was probably one of the hardest things we've had to do for quite a while, but we just felt it was necessary. And interesting in that process, I've shared this story with some of you. The idea was, let's downsize, get our, out from under a mortgage and try to downsize our expenses and things like that and just be more efficient. And so we were looking at houses that were kind of small, and we had actually found one. We weren't totally thrilled about it, but, we felt like we were leaving this great home and going to a smaller house, and we were just going to do it. And so we were kind of unloading some possessions to get into this smaller house. But previously, we had looked at the house on 147th Street and put in an offer, but a higher offer was accepted, and we didn't get that one. And so we had plunked some money down on this house not too far from where we live now. And the realtor calls one day, or texts, and says, the house on 147th Street is available again. Would you like to go look at it? And I was confused and texted her back and said, we already gave you a down payment on this other house. How can we just walk away from that? And she said, well, something wasn't sitting right with me with that, and I haven't given the check to the other realtor yet. And later she told me, I just felt the Lord was saying, don't turn in that check. And so we were free to go look at this other house, which felt awkward, but we went and looked at it. And it was a fixer-upper, as many of you saw early on. But it was within our range. It wasn't downsizing in square footage, but it was going to be a downsizing expense. And so we felt a good thing. But we looked at the house, went home. I remember it was a Thursday afternoon. 45 minutes about, we were back at the house calling in an offer, and they had accepted it. And we went to the house on 147th Street. There's another part of that story. Many of you were there. Most of you were there when we started the church in our living room. But there's another part of that story that I'd forgotten about in all of the hard things of the winter and summer last year. Just kind of forgot about this. But Julie and I had wanted to flip a house for quite some time. And in the couple of years before, we had looked at a number of houses, mostly farther into the city, over toward Nichols Hills, and actually put some offers in on several houses, but none of them came through. And every time we were like, God, what are you doing? Why did this fall through? They should have accepted our offer. One of them, we came in quite a bit over the highest bid, and they still took that other bid. We didn't understand. And we'd walk through this house, and it was definitely a flipper. And Julie and I would say, well, I would do this, and I would do that. And then recently we saw the people that bought it are flipping it, and just most of the stuff we had said we would do, they have done. And it was like, why couldn't that have been us? And I'd forgotten about all that. But I started thinking through some of those houses. Most of them were further into the city, not in the location that we're at now. And most of them, we'd be pretty squished to put 40 or 50 people in those living rooms. And most of them didn't have a parking situation like we had on 147th Street. So we took those things as signs that God wanted us to be in the right place at the right time for One Hope Community Church to come together. And in that time, we'd sort of taken a break from the Friday fellowships. We were going to move into this house, and we had to tear out all the floors. And we knew it wasn't going to be a good time for us to be entertaining people, so we sort of put the Friday fellowships on hold. And one of the people that had talked to us during earlier on, even before the Friday fellowships, was Tim and Carrie Bricker. And later on, while we were at the house, we had talked about, maybe down the road we might start, Sunday services or something like that. But we were thinking like down the road. And Carrie Bricker, or Tim, I guess it was, sent me a text and said, hey, what time do you guys meet on Sunday? If you're, meeting, we're going to come. And Julie and I had this conversation. Well, we're not meeting on Sunday right now. We're not really ready. This house is a mess. The walls are purple. And we're not at that point yet. But we talked about it, and we just said, you know what? Maybe this is the Lord. Maybe God is calling us at this time to open the doors and say, let's do it. I don't know where it's going, don't know what's going to happen here, but maybe God is saying now. And so we put it together and, started putting the word out, and people were telling others. We didn't know how many people were going to come. I thought maybe, 20, 25, sort of like, let's just see what God might do. And that morning came, and Julie and I were setting up chairs, and we were having this kind of ongoing dialogue. You know how you have these with your spouse or others, you might be saying, just kind of keep the question going. How many chairs should we set up? And we'd go back and forth, and I just kept saying, I just don't think we need to set that many chairs up. And we gathered up all the chairs that we had in the house. We just set up all the chairs, every chair. So I was bringing lawn chairs in from outside, kitchen chairs. We brought chairs. We opened boxes in the garage. The chairs were packed. We brought every chair. And when we were done, we counted, and there were 41 chairs. And that morning, 41 people showed up. And I look back and I say, that was God. That was, I believe, another sign that God was saying, I'm going to make this happen. You just follow me. You stay faithful. Be obedient. This is going to come together. That was one of the things I think was kind of a miracle in the whole thing. And then every time, we'd be at the house, Sunday would be there, we'd be getting ready, getting chairs together, and we'd see someone new coming up the sidewalk or coming through the door, and there'd be like, oh, they're coming. Oh, look who's here now. Hey, Julie, look who just came through the door. And we'd experience this joy, this excitement, and then it would kind of hit me, I'm going to be their pastor now. And I have a responsibility for these folks. And I'm going to shepherd them. And that first Sunday, by the way, it was July 19th, Sunday 1. Do you remember? We called it Sunday 1. July 19th last summer. And that was the Sunday that Casey and Melissa came. And I was so excited as Casey and Melissa began to pray and consider joining this effort. And many of you, could tell your own stories of how God was urging you to that point to say, go. And I'm so thankful that you too were obedient to the Lord. And then we went through this cycle where people kept asking, when can I give an offering? When can I give, how can I give? And some people even were giving money and saying, I don't need any record of this, but just go spend it on this or that, or, And I was scrambling, trying to put together the government papers with the state of Oklahoma to be a church and nonprofit and all that. Some of that is still underway with the federal government, but we got our number with the state taken care of, and we were official, recognized by the state of Oklahoma, and we had that first offering. And I remember when it was counted and they came to me and said what it was, I was like blown away. I was expecting, maybe a third of that. And then we began talking about, we need to put together a budget. And we watched what happened financially in those months. And it was very consistent. And so we felt like this is a sign that we can at least put together kind of a temporary budget and kind of make some plans. And we felt growth. But we did put down some conservative plans initially that allowed us to sort of push for the future and think about where we're going to meet besides our living room. And it was during that time that our worship team came together. That was another God thing. God brought together people that, were young, are young, but put in their hearts to do this every week. I stood right here this morning and I told them, I'm so thankful that you chose to come here and to lead. I'm so thankful that you're serving the Lord here at One Hope Community Church, because it's a big, important part of what we do, giving our praise and our worship to the Lord. That was just huge to have that worship team come together. And each week we have observed, even to today, how they just keep getting better and better musically, and they sound better together. And God is doing a really neat thing there. And then the choosing of the name. I was frankly a little concerned because we were hearing all kinds of things. People would hand me slips of paper and there'd be like 20 names. I'd be like, how are we going to narrow this down? And there were several things that we kept hearing as themes as we press forward to choose a name. We kept hearing that we want our church to be a safe place, a place where people feel comfortable, at ease in attending. And we also feel one of the themes we kept hearing was it's really about Christ and the hope that he offers through the gospel. And our hope is in him. It's not in any magic formula or the right number of chairs or, the right color of carpeting or whatever those things are. Our hope is in Jesus. And we narrowed it down and chose One Hope Community Church. And I just think that's really a special name. It's an unusual name. There aren't a lot of churches that are called One Hope Church. There are few. But when you Google it, we come right to the top. It's a very unusual name, but I think it's very special. And it describes who we are. During that time, one of the things that happened, I meant to tell this story a couple of weeks ago. There was a family, a woman and a man who were in my first youth group up in Minnesota, and their son had come down with cancer. And they were just going down to Minneapolis. They lived in Minnesota. They were going down to Minneapolis to have treatments. They pretty much lived in Minneapolis for about 3 months while he was going through these treatments. And she posted one day the verse, which we've chosen for our theme verse, Psalm 62. Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. It was really special that Emily and Nathan and their son Seth, their kids, they sat right over here 2 Sundays ago. And that was really a special time for us and for them, because for them as well, it was really about hope. Their hope was in the Lord. And I loved how when we were at meeting at 147th Street, I loved how people were so concerned about our neighbors. I was worried too. There was a lot of cars, and we worked out that system where everybody sort of pulled straight in. It kind of made the cul-de-sac there unusable for Sunday morning for a couple hours, and I kept thinking, oh man, my neighbors are going to string me up one of these days, and just so worried about it. And then one night I was out, I think I was taking the garbage out, and it was really dark, and I'm out there in the driveway, and I hear this voice, hey neighbor, I haven't met you yet. I thought, uh-oh, here comes one of the neighbors. And this guy from a few doors down came up, and he introduced himself, and he was telling me about who he was, and I said, I got to tell you, I'm really sorry about the traffic on Sunday morning. I said, you probably noticed we're starting a church in our home. We don't expect we're going to be there forever. We're really trying hard to find another location. He says, don't worry about it. He says, matter of fact, my family, we're attending another church up north from here on Sunday morning. Our house is open. If you need more space, you can use our living room for Sunday school or something. And I thought, there's a sign that God is taking care of this, even in the neighborhood when we're worried about, this is a residential area and we're a church meeting in a house. God was providing back then. And then we had the donation of the chairs, which we're sitting in this morning. 115 chairs. I'm thankful for Ken Murphy making that connection for us with Bridgeway. That was really timely. We had more chairs than what we needed. We put about 60 of them at the house, and then we put the other half in storage. And we have an offer for more chairs when we need them. I'm just saying, I think we're going to need them at some point. I think that's what God is doing here, it seems. Praise the Lord for that. It was during that time that we put together the steering team so that we could have provisional leadership. It was really important to me, coming from where we were coming from, to make sure that we were all together on decisions. That it wasn't the agenda of one person or a couple people, but that we had unity in our decisions. And I think God's giving us that. It seems God is putting that together. We have great agreement in our decisions. And that's one of my prayers for One Hope. It was during that time, too, that I received a phone call from Christy Aiken. And she said, hey, tell me, my mom came home today and she was telling me about your church. Tell me what's going on. And so I got to tell her the story of what God was doing. And before I could finish the story, she said, listen, I'm going to make you guys a website. She said, and I'll even take care of your hosting. I'll take care of putting the website together. I'll do the maintenance on it. We had a problem last week. I sent Christy an email. Within a few hours, the website was back up and running. Most of you probably didn't even know that happened. She's been taking great care of it. I think our website is beautiful. And it's a great sort of front door for people. When we have visitors, I know they're going to go to the website and check us out and see what we're about before they come. So we're thankful for that. It was also during that time on 147th Street that we got to send out our first missionary, Aaron Dyer. That was really a special day. To think, here we are in the beginning stages, and some churches would say, we're not going to think about missions right away. We're not going to think about sending people out until we build up what God is doing here. But I felt God was saying, this young girl's going to the mission field, and we need to get behind her and support her in prayer. And I'm so thankful for the way that you guys have done that. And you've written her. She was telling me not long ago, she so appreciates the communication from One Hope and just loves that her church is keeping contact with her. So keep up the good work. It was during that time that the ladies' Bible study started. Or am I getting ahead? Was that later? And the turnout on the ladies' Bible study was pretty significant. And we're thankful for that. But one of the things that I think, when I think back to that time, it really wasn't that long ago. It just seems like yesterday. But one of the things that I think about when I look back on that time was just the unity and just the one heart that we had as we were moving forward. There were a lot of things that we didn't talk about, but it seemed like when decisions came up, we were all thinking the same way. We were all thinking about the same things. And God was giving us a special unity. And that's really important, I think, for the future and for the building of One Hope. And then Casey and I were working on a new location. And that was probably the first big hurdle for us. The first big, time when we had to trust the Lord and say, God, what are we, we knew we couldn't stay in the house forever. We felt that there was going to be a cap on growth at the house. We heard people saying, I have friends, but we're going to invite them when we have a location. And so Casey and I would go out a couple times a week and just drive around, and we'd see signs and we'd call. I don't know how many dozens of brokers that I called and contacts that I followed up on. And some of you would hand me, hey, I saw this place, and hand me a slip of paper with an address or a phone number or a picture. And we followed up on everything. And I was frankly getting kind of discouraged. I was wondering, is this church going to stay in my living room forever? Or are we going to have a place one day? Is there really going to be a place? And then this place came up, and frankly, when we came by at first, I was like, I don't know, it's not as far north as I thought we could be. It just wasn't exactly. But Casey and I came by a couple times. Others were driving by. And so then we said, let's go have the steering team at least look at it. And I think that day when we came here, we looked at a couple places. When we came here, I think it was like the Lord was saying, this is everything we need. It's not maybe our ideal, but it suits our needs for right now. We have space to worship, and we have Christian education space. We have, children's church meeting right now on the other side. We have space for that. I think this place is meeting all of our needs, and I think God was directing us even in that and providing for us. And when we got here, I kind of sensed a whole new wave of excitement. Maybe you sensed this too. That first work day, man, people came out of the woodwork, and we got after it. We got rid of the black wall that was over here with the karate guy on the wall. Painted the whole room, and it just started to feel like this is home. This is home for us for a while. And it really does feel like God's provision, and we still feel that excitement about what He's provided for us. And then we started with the building of the platform, and I don't know if you remember, but it used to clump when we'd walk around, and just really saw God's provision in a lot of ways. We felt like we had the bones. We had the bones for what we needed to begin worshiping together and see this church get off the ground. I want to take just a break here and talk about the finances of the church. We're going to talk about finances a lot. And somebody reminded me this week, we don't even take an offering. We probably won't do that. There's a basket there. If you want to give, that's how you can give. If you want to go online, you can give there. God has provided for us. We haven't hounded anybody. We haven't asked anybody for money. We rarely talk about it. We probably actually need to talk about it a little more than we do, just so people are informed. But that first offering was around $10,000, and it stayed that way from that first offering in August up through October, part of October, and then we started to see this increase. Initially, we set a budget around $10,000, and that would meet our needs. It allows Casey and I to take a very small salary. It allows us to pay the rent, the light, the electric bill, the water bill, different things. But then in October, we started to see a little bit of an increase. And then in November, we saw another increase. And then in December, I get these automated reports that they've set up on QuickBooks. So after the last Sunday of the month, it just spits out a report. I get it about 3 o'clock in the morning. This report comes through. And the December number said $14,500, $14,500. And I thought, that's the greatest offering we've ever had. That's the greatest month we've ever had. God is really blessing us. And not only is God blessing us, God is blessing us through your generosity. You have been generous givers. I can see that. And we're so thankful for that. You have really been, I think, sensitive to the Lord. And when you give your offerings, I sense that you're giving to the Lord. You're not giving to a cause or, to pay bills or something like that. You're giving to the Lord. And we appreciate that perspective. And I think God is blessing us for it. I really do. But I got that report and it said $14,500, and I was so excited. And then they came with another report and said, we forgot about year-end giving. And so this wasn't on the automated report, and so we amended the report, and that's the one that's up here. Our December, and that's even incorrect because there was some more that came in the mail after the first, but we're at almost $30,000 for December. It's amazing. God is blessing us in a very special and unique way. There's a lot of fear in the world with the future. And usually when there's fear, we tend to hold back and say, I need to hang on because I got to prepare for the future. We tend to pull in. And I see you doing just what God would have us do. To say, no, I'm going to trust in the Lord. And I'm going to trust my offerings to Him. That's something that we're just going to keep praising the Lord for. And then I wanted to just take another sidetrack from that and talk about something that's kind of personal that Casey and I feel like God is blessing us personally. He has a story he's going to come up and share with you, just a short story. While Casey's coming, I'll just tell you, a couple of weeks ago, my tax bill was coming due, and I was kind of concerned, like, where's this going to come from? And I just was collecting from my, different resources. And the day I went to the bank, I was like just a few dollars off of what that tax bill was going to be. I just remember sitting at the bank. I hadn't calculated it all until I was filling out the slip, and I sat there at the bank and I said, Lord, thank you that you are providing the resources I need to take care of my family. And I just want to say thank you to you guys for being generous in your offerings. Thank you for your trust in the Lord. We're trusting the Lord too. Casey wants to tell you about something that happened with him as well.
Is this on? Well, I appreciate you, Doug, giving me the time when everybody's hungry and they're ready to go. So I'll try and keep it short. Obviously, I resigned from a 15-year job that I had before. It was really hard. I spent a lot of time praying about this. It was something that was weighing on me heavily. And I remember the day that I decided to go ahead and resign. And I remember walking my neighborhood multiple times praying, is this what you want, God? Is this what you want? The door needs to be open. And he clearly opened it very quickly for me to do that. Then I started thinking, oh no, what am I going to do? I have no job. How is God going to provide? Well, he opened the door for me to go, so I started trusting him to do that for me. So I started working in trim carpentry for a little bit, just trying to get a skill and get into something to help supplement our income. And that fell through a couple months later. But we have a fairly new neighbor next to us, and I was getting the trash and putting it away one time, and my neighbor came over and said, hey, I have something that's a piece of furniture, and I know you've done some woodwork, can you look at this and see if you can do some things on it for me? And I said, okay, sure. I'm like, I barely know woodwork, but I probably could do something. So I looked at it, and her mom happened to show up, and her dad, and introduced me to them and said, he's been a pastor, and he's been doing some carpentry work, and I was just asking him to do this. And she asked kind of my story, so in about 4 minutes or so, I kind of shared what was going on, and not really in depth, just kind of where we were at. And I told my neighbor, I said, hey, I'll come over this week and do some work on this for you, and which I didn't do, by the way. It was a couple days ago I got it finished. But she's pregnant, and she was had this really old, ornate piece of furniture she wanted to use in the baby's room, so she's redoing it. And so I was like, well, she's almost due. I better get over there and get this done. So I got that done for her. But what really shocked me, through this whole process, God has done some things that has brought tears in my eyes, not because of what was actually happening in front of me, but that I got to actually see what God was doing. That He was working in ways I hadn't seen in a long time. And I sit there and I think to myself, man, God is blessing our church. He's blessing us. He's doing what He tells us He's going to do. But back to the story with my neighbor. Her mom comes over and knocks on our door. We don't know this lady at all. And she said, I've been saving this money for a long time now. And I haven't felt led to give it to anybody, but God is telling me to give this to you. And gave it to my wife. And my wife tells me what's going on. I'm thinking, she didn't know us at all. She's listening to God of what He is doing. This is just a small example. I have many that I don't feel would be appropriate to share right now and here in privacy of certain people that have really helped us out during this time. But for me, I would rather go through a time where I'm uncertain, knowing God's going to provide and see Him work, than to have all the money in the world and not have to rely on Him at all. And I think that's where we're at as a church. We're seeing Him provide in ways that if we didn't have to do this, if we didn't feel led to do this, we would probably come to church and not see God's provision in things that we need and working in ways that He does all the time. It's just who He is.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. There's still more.
Hope you're not hungry.
I can't help but think about, not just personally, but for us as a church. Philippians 4:19. And my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. Matthew 6:31 and 32, Jesus said, therefore, do not be anxious about anything, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. And usually we quote verse 33, but not 31 and 32 that I just quoted. 33, we know, seek first his kingdom. That's what we're to focus on. And we're going to try to make that our priority here at One Hope, just to keep seeking God and trusting him with all the other things. And we want to apply that dependence on the Lord here at One Hope. We're asking God to do some pretty big things. We know we won't be here forever. We're asking God to show us the way into the next phase. And maybe someday down the road, I'll be standing in another location and we'll be telling the same stories from a new perspective. Matthew 7:11. If then you who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? We're just going to keep asking the Lord about our future and what he's got for us. Beyond all that giving, there were all these gifts that were coming in. I'd get a phone call a couple times a week. Casey was getting phone calls. Hey, can you let me in the church? I want to drop something off. There was the water cooler. And I don't know what it is about that water, but it tastes really good. I go through several glasses every Sunday morning. The Keurigs, the table the coffee's on. The furniture set was dropped off one day. Somebody came to me after a service one day and said, after the message this morning, I feel the Lord leading me to get that platform carpeted. And it's so quiet now, and it's just wonderful that we have this carpeted platform. There were other things, the game tables on the other side for the youth. You know, first we were loaned some sound equipment, and the steering team set aside a budget. We were going to set aside, I think it was an initial $1,000 or $1,500 for sound equipment to just put some, like an outlay to make an initial purchase. And then we had earmarked $500 a month. And then a donation came in and took care of pretty much all. We still haven't spent the $500 a month and the $1,500 or the $1,000 we set aside. It's there. We didn't need to spend it because there was a donation. The 2 screens, and these have been wonderful. We can see the worship of the words. The Christmas trees, one of the Christmas trees was donated. We had donation of cleaning supplies. The A-frame signs that we put out at the road every Sunday were donated by a local company. The refrigerator, some of the paint was donated. I didn't realize this until the other day. The signs on the doors were donated. And last week you heard about the sign out at the tower. Did you notice the sign is up today? And so we have even greater visibility every day. And I drove by it in the night later in the evening when the lights were on. And man, it just lights up. And it's so cool to see our name up there. And then I think about the way that we're growing. Not just numbers. And we've been excited about how we're growing numerically. That's just one way I think that we're growing. It was really exciting on Christmas Eve to see 78 people here. Folks that we hadn't seen in a while, or folks that have chosen to be a part of One Hope. It's exciting to see who God is bringing to our doors. There's also a growing number of people volunteering. Casey and I have been working on these clipboards up here. We have 4 or 5 different ways that you can serve the Lord here at One Hope. And we see a growing number of people signing up to participate in that. In my estimation, I think excitement is growing. I made the statement way early on. I think we were still at 147th meeting at our house. I said, I hope we never lose the new church smell. I don't think we've lost it yet. I feel like it's growing. I feel like excitement is growing for what God's doing here. And we're just thrilled to be a part of that. There's a real sense of anticipation for the future. Well, now that we're at the end of our little storytelling time, what do we do with this? What is our response to be, knowing all the things that God has done? Ken Murphy posted this video on his Facebook page a couple of weeks ago, and I thought there's probably nothing more appropriate than this. I'm going to ask Kyle to roll this video. All glory be to Christ, right? It's all for His glory. We'll close with this. I just want to read Psalm 62:5. It's our church's theme verse. I'll read it again. Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from Him. Truly, He is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken.